قد أفلح المؤمنون.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل Muhammad. Respected Muslim brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It has been a while, but we are back with another biography of one of the Salaf al-Salih. And today we're going to be going over the biography of one of Rasulullah's greatest companions when it comes to the sheer volume of knowledge that he transmitted for us, when it comes to the amount of ahadith that were narrated on his authority, and when it comes to his longevity as well. It's very interesting for the fact that he lived to such an old age. And of course, I'm talking about none other than Jabir ibn Abdullah ibn Amr ibn Haram al-Ansari. So Jabir is very interesting because a lot of Shia have heard of Jabir. They know of Jabir. They've heard a story here and there. They've heard of a narration here and there. However, very few people have looked at his biography in detail. Very few people have examined who was this man, what is his origin, what were his contributions. Because as we know, Jabir was a companion of Rasulullah and a companion of Amir al-Mu'mineen, Salamullah alayhi, al-Hasan wal-Hussein, and Imam al-Sajjad, and he lived to see Imam al-Baqir, Salamullah alayhi. He adrak al-Baqir, Salamullah alayhi. However, when this is something that historians and scholars have made note of, that Jabir radhiyallahu ta'ala alayhi, he did not live to the imama of al-Imam al-Baqir. He lived to see, like, to Imam al-Baqir, like he was a child when he encountered Jabir. He was very young. However, he did not survive long enough to see him become an imam. Before we begin, just a basic breakdown of who he was and what roles he performed for the Islamic Ummah. Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Sulami al-Ansari. He was a scholar, he was a soldier, and he was one of the Salaf al-Salih. He was a righteous companion of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. Rasulullah sent salams to our Imam al-Baqir through him. And he was a righteous man. رجل صادق وصديق وابن رجل شهيد من الشهداء. His father was a shaheed, and we'll go over his father's martyrdom. And he also has the distinction of being the first to perform ziyarah to the grave of Abu Abdullah salamullah alayhi, to perform the what we now know as Ziyaratul Arba'in. And I will make note, he's not technically the first person to visit the grave of Al-Hussein after his death, but he is the first of the Mu'mineen that we know to come to visit his grave after he was buried. And he is one of the most prolific narrators of the prophetic sunnah. And he was born in the year 16 before Hijrah in the city of Yathrib, and he died in the year 78 after Hijrah in Medina. He was born in Yathrib, but he dies in Medina, and he was 94 years of age. And this can be derived from Kitab al-Isti'ab by Ibn Abdul Barr al-Andalusi. Ibn Abdul Barr in Kitab al-Isti'ab from page 114 to 115, he records the bio of Jabir, and he records the year of his, like how old he was when he died. And so this allows us to figure out how old he was, or rather when he was born. So his bio is also recorded by Ibn Qutayba in Kitab al-Ma'arif. And in Kitab al-Ma'arif, he similarly gives us this information on page 173. That being said, let's go over to the basic info on Jabir, including his titles and his lineage. Jabir's kunya was Abu Abdurrahman, according to some reports, but the most reliable is that his name was Abu Abdullah. His kunya was Abu Abdullah. And Abu Abdullah is a very common kunya, I've noticed, is that many of the companions, many of our imams, they have this kunya of Abu Abdullah. So this has been reported in al-Mustadrak al-Sahihain in volume 3, page 652. In his bio of Jabir ibn Abdullah, he records with his chain to Wahab ibn Kaysad. He says, "Qila li Jabir ibn Abdullah ya Aba Abdullah." So it is from there that we derive his kunya. And also on the page you can see we have underlined from Aba Na'im. He says, "Mata Jabir ibn Abdullah sanat 79." So that corroborates what we stated earlier regarding his age, regarding when he died. Ibn Sa'd reported, and this is in Kitab al-Tabaqat al-Kubra by Ibn Sa'd, volume 3, page 423. He reports that Jabir's lineage is as follows. هو جابر ibn Abdullah ibn Amr ibn Haram ibn Tha'laba ibn Haram ibn Ka'b ibn Ghan ibn Ka'b ibn Salma, and he was from the tribe of Khazraj. And his mother was a lady by the name of Anisa bint Amma bint Adi, or Amma bin Adi ibn Sinan ibn Nabi' ibn Amr ibn Suwad, Ridwanullahi ta'ala alayhim. I'm referring to his parents, may Allah be pleased with them. Now, let's discuss Jabir's father, Abdullah ibn Amr. Abdullah ibn Amr is one of the madlumeen of Uhud. What do I mean by this? There is a certain group of Sahaba who were martyred during the Battle of Uhud, the likes of Mus'ab ibn Umair, the likes of the father of Hudayfa, the father of Jabir, Juwaybir. There are many figures in early Islamic history, and they were martyred during the Battle of Uhud. And so, many people do not discuss them. Many people do not talk about them. And so, we want to bring some attention to this great man and to what he offered for Islam. So it has been reported with an isnad to Sayyiduna Zurara, Ridwanullahi ta'ala alayhi, who reports on the authority of Imam al-Baqir. And Imam al-Baqir, as we know, he had a very close relationship with Jabir. So he is no doubt an authority on this matter. So he reports the following. He says, and this is reported by Al-Kishi in Ikhtiyar Ma'rifatul Rijal, in volume 1, page 193, report number 87. He says the following. He says, Abdullah, the father of Jabir ibn Abdullah, was among the 70 and among the 12. And Jabir was among the 70, but not among the 12. What this means, there's a very important explanation here. There's some context required here. This is a reference to what is known as Bay'atul Aqaba. This Bay'ah happened in the year 2 before Hijrah. 2 years before Hijrah, a group of the people of Yathrib, who would become to be known as the Ansar, came to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam, and they gave him Bay'ah. Correct? 12 people came and they gave him Bay'ah. So Rasulullah appointed these 12 men as his nuqaba, as his naqibs over their tribe. Jabir and his father did not attend the first bay'ah. However, they attended the second bay'ah. The second bay'ah happened a year later, 1 year before Hijrah. First bay'ah was in 2 before Hijrah. Second bay'ah was in 1 before Hijrah. So, Jabir and his father attended the second bay'ah. The first bay'ah, only 12 people were there, but in the second bay'ah, 70 people were there. Correct? So, when it comes to the second bay'ah, the second bay'ah of Aqaba, Jabir and his father both attended the second bay'ah. And in the second bay'ah, Rasulullah also appointed naqibs. So he appointed 12 naqibs again. So Imam al-Baqir is saying, what he's saying here, Jabir was among the 70 and among the 12. Or I'm sorry, the father of Jabir, Abdullah ibn Amr, was among the 70 and among the 12. He says he was one of the 70 people who was there in the second bay'ah, and he was one of the 12 people who was appointed. Jabir was among the 70, he was at the bay'ah, but he was not appointed as one of the naqibs, because he was very, very young. Shaykhuna as-Saduq, rahmatullahi alayhi, he reports in Kitab al-Khisal. In Kitab al-Khisal, as we know, al-Khisal is a book about numbered characteristics or numbered things. So, in Kitab al-Khisal, Shaykh al-Saduq reports the following. He says, with his chain to Aban ibn Uthman al-Ahmar, rahimahullah, who is an early Shi'i historian, he says, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam was commanded to choose 12 naqibs, 12 representatives, just as Musa alayhi salam had chosen. And among those he chose was Jabir's father, Abdullah ibn Amr ibn Haram. And an interesting note here is that Jabir's father at this point was a very old man. He was in his 80s or 90s, and he was very well respected among the Khazraj. He was a very notable Khazraji. So Ibn Qutaybah and Ibn Sa'd reported that Abdullah ibn Amr he witnessed the Battle of Badr along with 70 of the Ansar. So this is corroborated, we would say, the narrations of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, the narration of Aban al-Ahmar rahmatullahi alayh. This is corroborated, and this is reported by both Ibn Sa'd in Kitab al-Tabaqat as well as Ibn Qutaybah, and we have referenced these sources before. They mention that his father attended Badr. So Jabir's father was at Badr, correct? And he was one of the 12 Naqibs, and he participated in both Badr and then Uhud, and then he was martyred in the Battle of Uhud. Ibn Abdul Barr narrates a report from Jabir's father. This is very, very rare because, as we said, Jabir's father died very early. He died in the Battle of Uhud. So it's very rare to see a hadith transmitted from him directly. However, there is one. I did manage to find one. In Kitab al-Isti'ab by Ibn Abdul Barr on page 418, he reports the following. A report from Jabir from his father. He says that he saw the Prophet wearing his ring on his right hand. And this is very interesting because we know in the school of the Ahlul Bayt, the Mu'mineen, we wear our rings on the right hand. Alhamdulillah. So now let us discuss the martyrdom of Abdullah ibn Amr, the father of Jabir. And before we discuss that, I want to note that Jabir, he did not attend the Battle of Badr because he was very young. He's very, very young, so his dad told him, you stay behind, you are too young to attend, I'm going to go attend this battle. And the other thing is that Jabir, if you look at his family history, Abdullah, his father, had many, many children, but all of them were girls except for Jabir. So Abdullah would tell his son, he's like, you're my only son, and I love you, you're the man of the house now, look after your sisters. And then he would go and fight with alongside Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So Al-Hakim reports with his isnad to Jabir ibn Abdullah. He reports the following with his isnad to Jabir. He says that Jabir radhiyallahu ta'ala alayhi said, my father said to me, O my son, and this is hadith, I believe, 4,912 to 4,913 in Al-Mustadrak, volume 3, page 224. He reports, O my son, I do not know if I will be among the first to be struck tomorrow. And this was before the Battle of Uhud. So I advise you regarding the daughters of Abdullah, his daughters, his Jabir's sisters, as good. So he's basically telling him, my son, if I meet my end tomorrow, if I attain martyrdom tomorrow, you are responsible for your sisters. Look after them for me. So the next day, the Muslims went into battle, and it is reported that Abdullah ibn Amr was the first Muslim casualty. He was the first of the Muslims to fall in battle. He also reported, and this is in the same source, I believe it's the next hadith, hadith 4,913, and I'm reading the English translation. From Jabir ibn Abdullah, he said, when the Battle of Uhud was imminent, my father called me at night and said, I see nothing for myself except being killed among the first of the companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam. By Allah, I have not favored anyone over you after the Messenger of Allah. So he's telling Jabir, he's like, Jabir, the first person, the person that I love the most is Rasulullah, and then after him it's you. So he told him, I have a debt, so settle my debt and treat your sisters well. So Jabir says, so we woke up, and the next day we got the news that the first one to be killed was my father, and I buried him with the others in a grave. Then I felt uneasy about leaving him with the others in the grave, so I extracted him after 6 months, and he looked as if he was buried on the day I buried him, except for his ear. So, and this is a karama that we see in regarding Sayyidina Hamza as well, salamullahi alayhi, is that later when Muawiyah, qabbahahullah, when he tried to dig up the shuhada of Uhud, that their bodies were in perfect shape. They had barely deteriorated. So Jabir is essentially saying, he's like, my father almost knew that he would be the first person martyred, and sure enough, he was giving me his last will, and he was telling me to take care of his debts and to take care of my sisters. So, Al-Bukhari wa Muslim, this is in Sahih al-Bukhari, hadith 1244, both Bukhari and Muslim report this hadith, and I believe the wording is very, very similar here. They report the following. They say that, on the authority of Jabir himself, once again, I lifted the sheet from when my father was martyred, I lifted the sheet from his face and wept, and the people forbade me to do so, but Rasulullah did not forgive me. Then my aunt Fatima began weeping, and Rasulullah said, "It is the same whether you weep or not. The angels were shading him continuously with their wings until you shifted him from the field." So Rasulullah is reassuring Jabir, and Jabir's his aunt, who's the sister of Abdullah ibn Amr. He's telling them, the Malaika are shading this man. They were honoring this great shaheed. At-Tirmidhi and Ibn Majah report the following. This can be found in Jami' at-Tirmidhi, Hadith 3010. Once again, on the authority of Jabir himself, he says, Rasulullah said to me, "Jabir, why do I see that you are upset?" So I said, "Ya Rasulullah, my father was martyred on the day of Uhud, leaving my family and debt behind." And this is something very serious. Those of you who have been in debt, been in serious debt, it's something that worries you. It's something that stresses you out. It's something that is very, very difficult. So you see that Jabir was now the head of his household, who's still very young, and he had no brother. He had, all these sisters that he had to look after. So he's telling Rasulullah, he's like, "Ya Rasulullah, the thing that's worrying me, the thing that's bothering me is this debt." So Rasulullah replied, "Shall I give you the news of what your father met Allah with?" So he said, "Of course, Ya Rasulullah." So he said, "Allah does not speak to anyone except from behind a veil, but he brought your father to speak to him directly. And he said, 'O my slave, do you wish that I give you anything?' So he said, 'O Lord, give me life once again so that I may fight for you a second time.' So Allah replied, 'It has been decreed by me that they shall not return.' So this ayah was revealed, 'Think not of those as dead who are killed in the way of Allah.'" This is a reference to the Quran. This is a famous ayah in the Quran. It's like, "Do not think that those who have attained martyrdom fi sabilillah are dead." And this is Surah Ali Imran, ayah 169. So according to this report from Jabir, this verse was revealed because of, regarding his father. Like, his father was one of the people who was met by this blessed ayah. Abu Dawood reports with his isnad regarding Jabir ibn Abdullah. It is found in Sunan Abi Dawood, Hadith 3232. He says, "A man was buried with my father." This is Jabir once again. "I had a desire at heart for that place for my burial, so I took him out after 6 months. I did not find any change in his body except a few hairs that touched the earth." This is another report corroborating what we mentioned earlier. And another report, and this one we must bring this forward, because as we know, there is a group of people who claim to be, that these people call themselves Muslims, and yet, subhanAllah, they love a man like Muawiyah. Wal-'ayadu billah. This is reported in Kitab al-Tabaqat by Ibn Sa'd. He reports the following. He says, 40 years after Abdullah ibn Haram's martyrdom, Muawiyah, qabbahahullah, ordered that the graves of the martyrs of Uhud be dug up. This is something that is the Mukhalifeen, many of them try to ignore, but this is corroborated by many other sources, and I believe even Ibn Kathir mentions it in Al-Bidayah wa Nihaya, is that Muawiyah wanted to dig a canal to Medina, and he ordered that it has to go through Uhud, that there was no other way. It had to go through Uhud, specifically over the graves of the Shuhada. And so this is where they tried to dig up the body of Sayyidina Hamza. So Jabir narrates, his father was one of the people that was buried there. So Jabir reports, he says, "I hastened to my father's grave and found that his body was fresh without any signs of decay." So now that we've spoken about his father, Abdullah ibn Haram, the one Allah Ta'ala alayhi, let's talk about Jabir himself and the story of him accepting Islam. So the story of Jabir begins with a great merit. It is that he witnessed the pledge of Al-Aqaba among the 70 Ansar who gave bay'ah to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam. And this is reported in many of the primary sources. It is reported in Kitab al-Tabaqat by Ibn Sa'd in volume 4, page 382, in Kitab al-Ma'arif by Ibn Qutaybah, which is another very, very old book, and Kitab al-Mustadrak ala Sahihain. All of them are in agreement regarding this, that Jabir, he was one of the youngest of the people to pledge bay'ah, to pledge to allegiance to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And he narrates the following. He narrates that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam asked them to give him bay'ah on the following conditions. You will pledge to listen and obey in times of activity and laziness, in ease and hardship, and to spend in times of difficulty and ease. You will enjoin good and forbid evil, and you will not be harmed by the blame of those who blame you in the way of Allah. And you will support me when I come to you, and you will restrain me from what you restrain yourselves, your wives, and your children. And this formula for the bay'ah has been reported by al-Hakim in al-Mustadrak al-Sahihain in volume 2, page 681 to 682, hadith number 4251. And I believe there's also a hadith from Ubadah ibn Samit, who is another Ansari, who he corroborates that this is the formula of the bay'ah. So as we mentioned before, Jabir wanted to participate in the Battle of Badr, but his father left him behind to take care of his sisters, who numbered 9. So he had 9 sisters that he had to look after his father was martyred. So he narrates that his father also left him behind when he went to the Battle of Uhud, but Jabir witnessed all of the other battles after that. So after that, he came of age and he participated in the campaigns, the battles with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, I wish to narrate a very beautiful story. There's a story about the relationship between Jabir ibn Abdullah and Rasulullah that is very beautiful, and it highlights a mu'jiza, a miracle, and a karama for the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So as we mentioned before, Jabir had 9 sisters, and he had a debt that he needed to take care of. So how did he deal with this problem? Bukhari reports the following. And this is once again on the authority of Jabir himself. He says that when his father died, he left 6 orphan daughters. Again, the last report said 9, this one says 6. This one would probably be more accurate. So it says, when the season of plucking the dates came, because as we know, before the Battle of Khaybar, the Muslims were not dealing in gold. They were not dealing in hard cash. They were dealing, trading whatever they could. And so, for them, dates was something that they would use to settle debts and that they would use to make business negotiations. So Jabir reports it was harvest time. When it was harvest time, I went to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and I said, Ya Rasulullah, you know that my father was martyred on the day of Uhud, and he was heavily in debt, and I would like that the creditors should see you. So Rasulullah said, go and pile every kind of dates apart. So I did so, and I called Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And what he's basically saying is Ya Rasulullah, these men who I owe money to, I wish you would come and simply be there in the room when I'm paying off my debt as a witness, and also just to get these people to sort of back off, to stop being so vicious and so cruel to me. Because when a creditor wants his money, it's like they want that money. They don't care about anything else. They want the debt to be paid off. So he says that Rasulullah came. And when the creditors saw him, they started claiming their debts from me in such a harsh manner as they had never done before. So when he saw their attitude, he went around to the biggest heap of dates 3 times and then sat over it and said, Jabir, call your companions. So then he kept on measuring and giving to the creditors their due until Allah paid off the debt of my father. So Jabir is saying what happened here is that Rasulullah came by this big pile of dates, and he would call to me, Jabir, send in the next one. Jabir, send them in. And so he kept giving them dates until he paid off my father's debt. And this is a known miracle of Rasulullah, and this is also a miracle attributed to Sayyidina Isa, the ability to multiply food. So here we see Rasulullah is essentially multiplying these dates until the debt is paid off. So Jabir says, and I would have been satisfied to retain nothing of those dates for my sisters after Allah had paid the debts of my father. So he's saying, I was so happy to be relieved of that debt. I was so happy to be relieved of this dain that for me, I didn't even care if any of it was left over. I didn't want any of it for me or my sisters. But he says, but Allah saved all the heaps of dates, so that when I looked at the heap where the Prophet had been sitting, it seemed as if not a single date had been taken away. So this is Rasulullah essentially came in and helped Jabir pay off his debt And by the time he was done, like not a single date was missing. He got to keep all of those dates for himself and his family. There's another beautiful report. This is the story of Rasulullah praying for Jabir's forgiveness. And there's many beautiful hikam and pearls of wisdom that can be derived from this report. This is Kitab Tabaqat ibn Sa'd in volume 4, page 389. It says the following. He says that, and again, with a chain to Jabir himself, let the man himself narrate his own story. He says, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam passed by me while I was leading a camel at the end of the people. And he asked me, what's wrong with your camel? So this story takes place during one of the campaigns of Rasulullah. He says, I was traveling and my camel was not cooperating. And so I was at the very end of the army. So Rasulullah came up to me and he said, what's wrong with your camel? So I said to him, Ya Rasulullah, it's limping or its back is injured. He says, I don't know what's wrong with it. So Rasulullah took hold of its reins and he struck it and he said, mount it. So he says, I got on the camel and I saw myself at the front of the people, although it had held back. So he's basically saying that when Rasulullah touched my camel, all of a sudden my camel was feeling fine and it raced to the front of the army. When we neared Medina, I wanted to hasten to my family. When we finally got close to Medina, I wanted to hurry on home. But Rasulullah had something to tell me. He wanted to talk to me about something. He said, don't go to your family at night. Don't go to your family yet. Hang on. So then he asked me, have you married? I said, yes. Now, before I go on, I want to explain this. Remember how I said there are multiple pearls of wisdom here? First of all, we've gone over a karama of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But secondly, when he says don't go to your family at night, I think I've seen other reports. What he's saying here is when you come back from a trip, try to come in the morning. Try to enter your house in the morning because at night your family is tired. They won't have the energy to greet you and to celebrate you, and you'll throw off their sleep. So wait till morning to go visit them. It'll be much easier for them to welcome you home. So then he asked, have you married? Rasulullah is asking Jabir, he's like, Jabir, are you still a bachelor or have you gotten married? So Jabir replied, yes. So he said, he asked me, a virgin or a matron? Did you marry a virgin girl or did you marry a woman who was previously married? So I said, a previously married woman, a matron. So Rasulullah then asked me, why didn't you marry a virgin so that you could play with her and she could play with you? Now, what this means, for those of you who are married, you know exactly what this means. For those of you who are not, allow me to explain. What Rasulullah is saying is that you, a young man who is a bachelor, who is a virgin, should try to marry a virgin girl so that they may enjoy each other's youth. So Jabir says to Rasulullah, it's like Rasulullah is asking him, why didn't you marry a virgin girl, Jabir? So Jabir says, Ya Rasulullah, my father Abdullah left behind young girls, so I disliked marrying those similar to them. I wanted to marry a woman who had some understanding. So he's saying, Ya Rasulullah, I have sisters to look after. My father Abdullah, he left these young girls and they're orphaned, and I'm their older brother, but I'm also like the father figure to them now. So I wanted to marry a more mature woman, a woman who would know how to look after my younger sisters. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam remained silent, neither praising nor blaming me. Now there is a hikmah here. We know that the sunnah of the Prophet is divided into three categories. Number one, what the Prophet says. Number two, what the Prophet does. Or number three, what the Prophet approves of. And his approval can be expressed through his silence. So from this hadith, we derive that there's nothing wrong with marrying a matron, with marrying a woman who's been previously married. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not haram, it's not makruh, we would say. However, Rasulullah, his preference for a bachelor is to marry a virgin girl, correct? However, in Jabir's case, Rasulullah had no issue with what Jabir had done. He recognized his circumstance. So Jabir continues, he says, Rasulullah then said to me, sell your camel to me. He says, Jabir, I want to buy your camel from you. So I said, it is yours, Ya Rasulullah. I said, Ya Rasulullah, take my camel for free. I'm not going to take any money from you. So Rasulullah said, no, sell it to me. So I said, it is yours, Ya Rasulullah. So he kept insisting on me. So I said to him, I owe a man an ounce of gold. For that price it is yours. He says, Ya Rasulullah, if you insist on buying my camel, if you refuse to take it as a gift, I have another debt that I need to pay. I owe a man an ounce of gold. For this price, it is yours. So he said, yes, and you will take it to your family, inshallah. So he sent for Bilal, radwanullahi ta'ala alayh, and he said, Bilal, give him an ounce of gold and more. He says, Bilal, give him an ounce of gold and then give him some more. So he gave me an ounce of gold and added a carat of gold. So I put it in a bag and said, this carat was given to me by Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam, and it will never leave me. So Jabir is saying that Rasulullah gave me an ounce of gold and a carat of gold extra. I kept that carat of gold for the barakah, is that this was a gift from Rasulullah. So Jabir narrates, he says, it remained with me until the people of Syria took it along with what they could take from me on the day of Al-Harra. And we know the day of Al-Harra is when Yazid's men attacked Medina. So Jabir says they stole that carat of gold that Rasulullah had given me. Correct? فَإِنَّا لِلَّهِ وَإِنَّا إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ. Furthermore, there's a detail that is corroborated by other reports. The reports tell us that when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he bought Jabir's camel, you know what Rasulullah did? He told Jabir, he said, Jabir, keep your camel. So Rasulullah essentially bought the camel from Jabir and then gave it back. So he simply gave Jabir the money to pay off his debt, and he gave him that extra carat as a gift, which Jabir held on to until it was stolen from him during Waqa'atul Harra. At-Tirmidhi reports the following, and this is a corroboration for the incident of this night. He says, in Sunan at-Tirmidhi, Hadith 3852, he says, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam supplicated for forgiveness for me on the night of the camel 25 times. He's like, on that night where Rasulullah encountered me and he helped my camel and he tried to, and he bought it from me, he says Rasulullah supplicated for my forgiveness 25 times in that one night. And this is a great manqaba for Sayyidina Jabir, wallahi ta'ala alayh. Another report regarding Jabir and Rasulullah is the story of how Jabir got sick. And so this is reported by Abu Dawood. It is reported in Tabaqat ibn Sa'd, and is also reported in Asbab al-Nuzul by al-Wahidi. However, I'm only going to quote Sunan Abi Dawood for brevity's sake. In Sunan Abi Dawood, read the following. It says that Jabir, and this is reported by Abu Zubayr. I want you to keep this name in mind. Abu Zubayr al-Makki. Abu Zubayr al-Makki also reported the last report from at-Tirmidhi. He was one of the big disciples of Jabir who narrated a lot of hadith on his authority. He says, Abu Zubayr narrated that Jabir said, I had 7 sisters and I fell ill. This is very interesting because we've seen reports that say he had 6. Now we're seeing that he had 7. He had a lot of sisters. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam came to visit me. So I was ill, I had a fever, and so Rasulullah came to visit me. So he blew on my face and I woke up. So I said to him, Ya Rasulullah, can I bequest for my sister 2/3 of my wealth? So Jabir here, he was worried that he was going to die, and he was thinking of his sisters. So Jabir says, Ya Rasulullah, can I will 2/3 of my wealth to my sisters? So Rasulullah told him, hold back. So I said, what about half? So then he said, hold back. And then he went out and left me. Because Rasulullah la yantiqu an al-hawa. When you ask him an issue of fiqh, he's not going to make up an answer. He needs the wahi to come down and give him the ruling. So he came back to me and he said, Jabir, you are not going to die as a result of your present illness. It's like, Jabir, don't worry, you're not going to die. Allah has revealed verses explaining the share of your sister, the share that your sister should have. He has appointed a portion 2/3 for them. And Jabir used to say that this verse of the Quran, and the reference for it is Surah 4, Ayah 176, Surah An-Nisa, Ayah 176. He says, this ayah was revealed about me. They ask thee for a pronouncement, say Allah has pronounced for you concerning distant kindred. And I believe this is called Ayatul Kalala because it deals with not Kalala, astaghfirullah, Kalala. It deals with the issue of Kalala, which is what happens when a man, he has no parents and no children, what happens to his wealth. Correct? Like, who is considered next of kin in this situation? Who inherits from him? Al-Bukhari further reports This is a very similar report. It's a corroborating report. In Hadith number 194, he says, Rasulullah came to visit me while I was sick and unconscious. He performed wudu and sprinkled the remaining water on me, and I became conscious. So in the last report, he says, I was sick, I had a fever. Rasulullah blew on me, and that allowed me to regain consciousness. In this report, the water from his wudu is what woke him up. So he says, Ya Rasulullah, to whom will my inheritance go, as I have neither ascendants, my parents, nor descendants? Then the divine verse regarding fara'id, inheritance, or fara'id, was revealed. Another report, and this one corroborates the one that we saw earlier. This comes from Kitab al-Tabaqat by Ibn Sa'd, volume 8. This report talks about the wife of Jabir, as we've mentioned her in passing. So those of you wondering, who was the wife of Jabir ibn Abdullah? According to Tabaqat ibn Sa'd, in his chapter on, or not chapter, in the volume, this is volume 8, where he goes over the biography of prominent women, he says his wife was his paternal cousin, bint Amma, we would say, Suhayma bint Mas'ud, radiyallahu ta'ala alayha. So, Al-Bukhari and Muslim report the following, and we'll quote Muslim's report for brevity's sake. They report the following, on the authority of Jabir himself once again. He says, my father died and left 7 or 9 girls, and I married a matron. So Rasulullah said to me, Jabir, have you married? And I replied, yes. So he said, a virgin or a matron? And I replied, a matron. So he asked me, why not a virgin? So that you might play with her and she with you, and you might amuse her and she amuse you. So I said, my father Abdullah died and left girls, and I dislike marrying a girl like them, so I married a lady so that she may look after them. So Rasulullah said, may Allah bless you, or that is good. So there is a similar report, but it has an addition at the end in Sunan al-Nasa'i, which is a very critical addition. Hadith 3226 from Sunan al-Nasa'i, he says the following. He says, on the authority of Ata ibn Yasar, Jabir reported that he married a woman at the time of the Prophet, and the Prophet met him and asked him, have you gotten married, Jabir? And he said, yes. He said, did you marry a virgin or a matron? He said, a matron, a previously married woman. So he asked, why not a virgin who could play with you, so that who you would play with? Correct? And this is another corroboration. This is now the 3rd time we're seeing this report. However, there's a critical addition at the end. Jabir says, Ya Rasulullah, I have sisters, and I did not want her to come between them and me. So Rasulullah said, that's better then. Then he says the following. This is a very important hadith from the Prophet ﷺ. He says, a woman may be married for her religious commitment, her wealth, or her beauty. You should choose the one who is religiously committed. May your hands be rubbed with dust, which is a phrase that means, may you prosper. So Rasulullah is telling Jabir, good job. You did not marry a woman thinking of her wealth or her beauty. You married her for the fact that she's a mu'mina, for the fact that she's a religious woman who will serve as a good wife to you, who will help you look after your sisters. Now, a report regarding Jabir's wife, it's a very interesting report. It's a very humorous report regarding Jabir's wife. It's in Kitab al-Tabaqat by Ibn Sa'd in volume 4, page 385, regarding his wife, Suhayma. It says the following. He says, once Rasulullah came to visit us. This is from Jabir again. Jabir says, Rasulullah came to visit. So I told my wife, don't ask Rasulullah for anything. It's like, Rasulullah's coming over, do not embarrass me in front of Rasulullah, do not ask for anything. If Rasulullah comes over, you remain quiet. So Jabir's wife replied, should Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa wasallam leave without us asking him for anything? It's like, yeah, I can't be serious. Rasulullah can't come to my house and I pass up the opportunity to ask him for something. So she called out, Ya Rasulullah, pray for me and my husband. And so it seems that when Rasulullah was over, she called out from the women's side of the house, from behind the hijab. She said, Ya Rasulullah, please pray for me and my husband Jabir. So Rasulullah said, may Allah bless you and bless your husband. And so Hubaysa was one of the narrators, right? He's one of the narrators. He narrates, he says that Jabir would that Rasulullah told them as he was leaving their home, he said, walk ahead of me and leave my back for the malaika. So Rasulullah is indicating, he says, wherever I go, there's malaika following me. So give them some space, give them some room. Correct? Now, there is a difference of opinion regarding the battle record of Jabir, as we mentioned, whether or not he attended Badr or Uhud. So there is a report on the authority of Abu Sufyan, not Muawiyah's dad, but another Abu Sufyan. And this is reported in al-Bukhari as well as, and this is not in Sahih al-Bukhari, this is in Bukhari's Tarikh al-Kabir. Tarikh al-Kabir, volume 2, page 715, bio 2194. He says that Jabir narrated that I supplied water to my companions at the Battle of Badr, and this is corroborated by Abu Dawood in his Sunan in Hadith 2731. So there is a report that indicates that Jabir says, I was at Badr, but I was a water boy. I was getting water for the soldiers. However, there are another report from, and this is reported from Bukhari, Muslim, and Al-Hakim, all with their chains to Abu Zubayr al-Makki. And I ask you, make note of this. The fact that Abu Zubayr is one of Rijal al-Bukhari wa Muslim and the same chain, correct? From Abu Zubayr al-Makki, from Jabir ibn Abdullah. So he narrates, and again, we're going to quote just Muslim's report for brevity's sake, Hadith 1813. He says that Jabir said, I fought in the company of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam 19 battles, and that he also said, I did not participate in the battle of Badr and the battle of Uhud. My father prevented me from participating in these battles as my age was tender. After my father was martyred on the day of Uhud, I never lagged behind Rasulullah, and I joined every single battle he fought. So, Al-Waqidi, it is reported in Kitab Mu'jam al-Sahaba. I believe this is by Al-Baghawi, if I remember correctly. He reports in volume 1, page 441, that Al-Waqidi, when he looked at these reports, he said, no, the second opinion is more accurate. However, we could say, in order to sort out this contradiction, we could simply say that Jabir did not fight in the Battle of Badr. He simply, was a water boy. So the reports do not necessarily contradict, and Allah knows best. Now, there's a miracle of Rasulullah that I would like to report. To narrate two more reports for you, inshallah, and then we'll end this part. We'll go over more of his bio in another session, inshallah. A very famous miracle of Rasulullah. It's a very beautiful miracle of the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this is reported by al-Bukhari in Hadith 4101. He reports that during the Battle of Khandaq, or in the preparation for the Battle of Khandaq, with his chain to Ayman ibn Abi Ayman, that Jabir said, we were digging the trench on the day of Al-Khandaq, and we came across a big rock. So we went to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and said, here is a rock appearing across the trench. So Rasulullah said, I'm coming over. So Rasulullah got up, and a stone was tied to his belly, for he had not eaten anything for 3 days. And this is something very famous on the authority of Amir al-Mu'mineen, salamullahi alayh, that he narrates. He says, there were times when we were so hungry that what we would do, we would take a stone and we would tie it against our stomach. And what you do, the reason why they would do this is because when your stomach is basically, when you're hungry and you do that, you press your stomach against your back, that reduces the pangs of hunger. That helps you cope with the pain. So Jabir says, when the Prophet got up, I saw that stone. I saw the hunger stone on his stomach. And so I thought to myself, dude, Rasulullah is hungry. There's got to be something I can do to help him. So Rasulullah has not eaten for 3 days. So he narrates, Rasulullah took that spade, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, that shovel, and he struck that stone until it became like sand. He smashed it to dust, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And so I said to him, Ya Rasulullah, can I go home for a bit? So he said, yeah, go ahead. So he says, I went to my wife, the wife of Jabir, we mentioned earlier, so he came home and he said to her, I saw Rasulullah in a state that I cannot treat lightly. Rasulullah is starving. We've got to do something about this. So he asked her, do we have anything for him to eat? So she replied, I have barley and a she-goat. So Jabir says, I slaughtered the she-goat and she ground the barley. One way or another, we're going to do something about this. We're not allowed, Rasulullah's not going to starve on our watch. So then we put the meat in an earthenware cooking pot. Then I came to Rasulullah when the dough had become soft and fermented, and the meat in the pot had been well cooked. So I said, I went up to Rasulullah. I said, Ya Rasulullah, I have some food at home. I have some food prepared for you. I'd like to invite you as my guest and one or two men with you. So, Ya Rasulullah, I want to invite you over for lunch. You've been working hard, and if you want, you can invite one or two of the other Muslimin to come with us. So Rasulullah asked, he said, how much is the food? So I told him about it. I said, I slaughtered a she-goat, just a little bit of meat and a little bit of bread. So Rasulullah said, it is abundant and good. Tell your wife not to remove the earthenware cooking pot from the fire and not to take out any bread from the oven until I reach there. So then Rasulullah said to all of his companions, get up, we're going to have lunch at Jabir's house. So poor Jabir at this moment must be thinking to himself, he's like, oh no, I only prepared enough for Rasulullah. It was my intention. I was trying to feed Rasulullah, and now he's invited everyone. How on earth am I going to feed all these people? And so Jabir narrates the Muhajirin and the Ansar. They all went up. All these hungry men who had been working in the Khandaq, they all went and they got up. So I went to my wife and I said, may Allah's mercy be upon you. The Prophet has come along with the Muhajirin and the Ansar and those who were present with him. So look at the reply of Jabir's wife. Well, what a blessed woman. What an intelligent lady. You know what she said to Jabir? She said, did the Prophet ask you how much food you had? I said, yes. So then the Prophet said, enter and do not throng. So Jabir's wife seemed to know that a miracle was coming. She says, wait a minute, Rasulullah invited all these people. Does he not know that we don't have a lot of food? He said, yes, he does. So Jabir's wife seems to be one step ahead. She's like, wait a minute, Rasulullah knows what he's doing. Rasulullah has something, he's ready to do something. So the Sahaba, the companions of Rasulullah, entered Jabir's home, and Rasulullah took the bread, the barley bread, and he started cutting it into pieces. He started shredding it into pieces. This is a meal called tharid. It's reported that this was Rasulullah's favorite dish, and he put the cooked meat over it. So he covered the earthenware pot and the oven when he took something out of them. So what Rasulullah would do, he had this pot, and he would reach into it, and he would take some meat and he would put it on the bread, and he would reach in and put some more meat on the bread. He would reach in, and he kept doing this continuously. He went on cutting the bread and scooping the meat until they all ate their fill, and even then some of the food remained. So Rasulullah said to my wife, eat and present to others as the people are struck with hunger. And so this is once again that miracle of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he could multiply food. And he fed his entire army using that small, meager amount of food, that bread and that meat that Jabir and his wife, Allah ta'ala alayhim, prepared for him. And this report is also narrated in Maghazi al-Waqidi. I didn't report it because Bukhari is a good enough source for most people. However, the fact that it is in Maghazi al-Waqidi shows this is a very old tradition. Correct? And lastly, I want to end off with the following hadith. This is a very, very important hadith. And I know this session has been really long, but this hadith is worth it. Trust me. This hadith is absolutely worth it. This report comes from, and I wish to narrate the report for you, and then I will tell you the source. The report says, and this is narrated with a very short chain. Those of you who, when you see the book that I'm quoting from, you'll understand why the chain is so short. It comes from Abdul Razak from Ma'mar an Ibn al-Munkadir, Muhammad ibn al-Munkadir, from Jabir ibn Abdullah. So he says, I asked Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, سألت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم عن أول شيء خلقه الله تعالى فقال هو نور نبيك يا جابر خلقه الله ثم خلق فيه كل خير وخلق بعده كل شيء إلى آخر الحديث. It's a very long hadith. Correct? This hadith is very, very important. Why? Because our opponents from the Mukhalifeen, they have this issue. يقصرون مع رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله. You will read many times that there are scholars from the Mukhalifeen who have weakened speakers and narrators for narrating this report. Say this is fake. This is ghulu. This is ghulu. To say that the first thing created was the nur of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And for many years, what they would do, they say there's no source for it. There's no source for this report. This report does not have a source. until Musannaf Abdul Razzaq was rediscovered in the 1970s. In the 1970s, a scholar from the Indian subcontinent rediscovered manuscripts from Musannaf Abdul Razzaq, and they were printed, the manuscripts were printed into a book in Saudi Arabia. However, there was a section in the first volume, in the very beginning, regarding Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that the Wahhabiyya qatalahumullah, they decided to remove. They removed this part when they printed the book. Why? Because for hundreds of years they had been denying these hadith. Now it had been found with 4-person chains. All of a sudden, all those times they called people ghulat and liars, all of a sudden, these hadiths were now proven to be true. This is a massive scandal, so they hid this. And as you can see, in the cover page of this book, al-Juz' al-Mafqud min al-Juz' al-Awwal min al-Musannaf li Abdul Razzaq al-San'ani, and this was printed in Lahore, Pakistan. The fact that they had to print this book in Pakistan, the Wahhabis were still refusing to print this, shows you that they were up to something. Correct? So when someone says that the first thing that Allah created was the nur of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that this is a 4-person chain from one of the primary sources, one of the earliest books of hadith, with a very strong chain of transmission as well. Correct? So this is not ghulu. Umuman, and there's even more. I wish I could go into more depth regarding this book. There are reports in this book. This is another famous manqaba of Rasulullah that the mukhalifin have denied. They say that whenever someone says that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was made of nur and that he would shine brighter than the sun, they say this is ghulu. But this is also confirmed in this book, in narrations from Ibn Abbas, where he says if Rasulullah was in a room with a candle, Rasulullah's nur would overpower the candlelight. And if Rasulullah went out into the sun, Rasulullah's nur was more powerful than the sun. Furthermore, the mukhalifin claim it is ghulu to say that Rasulullah did not have a shadow. That is also confirmed in the missing part of the first volume of Musannaf Abdul Razzaq. However, we are focused on the report of Sayyidina Jabir, Wallahi ta'ala alayhi. Jabir is reporting from Rasulullah himself. He's saying the first thing that Allah Almighty created was the nur of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And with that being said, we will bring this session to a close. Inshallah, in the next session, we will go over some of the reports regarding Jabir under the early Khulafa, under Amir al-Mu'mineen, salamullahi alayhi, under Muawiyah, and we will hopefully go from there until his death. And we will ask you to please keep us in your dua. وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين.